All right. Hey, everybody, and welcome back. We're diving deep today.
Always a pleasure to be back here.
Yeah. And we're really tackling a big one today, accountability. But, you know, not just like, did you finish your chores
Yeah.
kind of thing.
Right.
This is like big A accountability,
Right.
like something way bigger than us,
Mm.
to a higher power, to the universe, God, whatever resonates. You sent in some really thought-provoking sources. And the one that just jumped out was this quote by Daniel Webster.
Yes.
Big time statesman,
Yep.
super
Yeah.
influential guy. And like they asked him, what's the biggest, most profound thought you've ever had? And you know what he said?
I think I know where you're going with this.
My accountability to God. Whoa, right,
Powerful stuff. And from a man like Daniel Webster, no less.
right. Like this isn't some hermit in a cave. This is a guy in the thick of it, making decisions that impact like tons of people.
Makes you think, doesn't it? Here he is, top of his game, worldly success and all that. But what sticks with him, what keeps him up at night, it's not power or legacy. It's this idea that ultimately he answers to something higher.
It almost reframes his whole like political career, right? Makes you look at it through a whole different lens.
Absolutely. If that was truly his most profound thought, you got to wonder how it influenced his actions, his decisions as a leader.
Yeah. Like, did he weigh every choice against this idea of divine accountability?
Yeah.
I mean, that's heavy stuff.
Heavy indeed.
Okay. But speaking of heavy, we got to talk about this story from the religious text you sent in.
Mhm.
Talk about accountability with a capital A King Belshazzar and that whole crazy feast. I mean, have you heard this one?
The story of Belshazzar's feast. It's a classic, isn't it? A cautionary tale for the ages.
It is. But for those who haven't, like, picture this. Belshazzar, king of Babylon, throws this mega party, super lavish, everyone's there. And get this, he's using these golden goblets and stuff, right? But they're not just any cups. They were stolen from the temple in Jerusalem.
Sacrilege. Talk about adding insult to injury.
I know, right? Major disrespect.
Mhm.
So they're partying it up, using these sacred vessels for their revelry. And then out of nowhere, this hand appears.
A disembodied hand.
That floats in, starts writing on the wall. Can you imagine? I'd be out of there.
I think a few folks probably sobered up pretty quickly at that point.
Oh, for sure. So they finally figure out what it says, and it's basically a big old message of judgment against Belshazzar. And guess what? That very night, Babylon gets conquered, and Belshazzar is toast. It's intense.
Right.
What do you think the main takeaway is there?
Well, on one level, it's a pretty stark illustration of actions having consequences. Belshazzar's defiance, his arrogance leads directly to his downfall. There's this cosmic balance, this sense that you can't just disregard the divine without repercussions.
Totally. Like what goes around comes around, right? But there's this other part that really got me thinking. It's where the text warns about being influenced by, people who don't share these beliefs. Have you ever felt that, like, pressure to conform? Maybe do something that didn't quite align with your values?
Oh, absolutely. I think it's a constant navigation, isn't it? Especially in a world with so many different viewpoints and beliefs, it's easy to feel swayed or pressured. Now, while this particular text emphasizes adhering to its specific teachings, I think there's a broader message there too.
Like what?
It's about staying true to yourself, to your core values, even when surrounded by differing opinions. It's about engaging in respectful dialogue, understanding different perspectives, and honestly, sometimes those challenging conversations can actually strengthen our own beliefs, help us articulate what we truly hold dear.
Yeah, I can see that. It's like iron sharpens iron, right?
Exactly. But to bring it back to the text itself, it ultimately says that salvation, escaping divine judgment, is only possible through Christ.
Right, which is, core to that specific faith tradition.
Yeah.
And it's a good reminder that different spiritual paths offer different approaches to these big concepts of accountability and salvation. So much to unpack there.
Absolutely. And I think that's the beauty of exploring these ideas. It's not about finding one right answer, but about engaging in the conversation, considering different perspectives.
Totally. So after this wild ride through accountability, from Daniel Webster to Belshazzar's feast, what's the big takeaway for our listeners?
Whether we're talking about accountability to a higher power, to our own personal values, or to each other, it's a force that shapes us. It guides our actions, influences our choices, and ultimately, I think, pushes us to be better versions of ourselves.
Deep stuff. So as we wrap up, here's a thought to chew on. How do you define accountability in your own life? And what steps do you take to make sure you're living in alignment with your values? Something to ponder on. Thanks for joining us for another deep dive. We'll see you next time.
Until then,